Hey, Chris here from Critical Outcast, here with the latest edition of the CritCast. And let me first apologize that I'm a bit under the weather, so my throat's a little messed up. So we'll try to get through this anyway. Anyway, we're getting closer to wrapping up my 2011 best of lists. This is actually the first half. Is as has really been the tradition over the past couple of years. I've found that there's been more than 10 movies that I've actually wanted to showcase each year, and so pretty much I've expanded it to pretty much 20 films, split between a back 10 and the top 10, counting down from 20 on down to one. So this edition, we take a look at the back 10, 20 down to 11, before we get to the big guns of the year. In any case, let's get started. Hopefully, you've either heard of some of these, or if you haven't, these are some movies you might want to check out. If you haven't heard of them, if you have, I hope you agree with me. But again, this is my list, my opinion. I haven't seen everything. I try to see as much as I can, but there's always some films that's going to get missed. Still, I think I do a pretty good job. In any case, let's start with number 20. It's a short film. It only runs a little over an hour. It's called Rambach, or longer titles, Rambach Berlin Undead. It's a zombie film. It was the first film released by BloodyDisgusting.com's film deal with the collective, and I have to say it's a fantastic movie. It's probably one of the best zombie movies of recent vintage. Although you could argue that's more of an infected film like 28 Days Later. Still, this film, for being as short as it still successfully sets up the zombie infected threat, gives us a solid group of survivors, gives them personalities, and places a whole variety of obstacles in their way. It's well written, well acted, well executed. If you're a fan of zombie movies, you have to check this out. It's really pretty impressive, and um, what else can I say? It's just a solid film. Number 19 is a superhero film, X Men First Class. Comic book movies have always been a tricky proposition because no matter how sure a thing looks on paper, you can always end up with some disappointed mess like something like Green Lantern or the Dayglow Nightmare that was Batman and Robin. Still, every once in a while there's somebody who gets it right, and Matthew Vaughn does get it right with X Men First Class, which uh, pseudo prequels. Hopefully, I don't think it's really supposed to be connected to the other X Men films because there'd be too many consistencies. But taken as its own, it's a solid film that gives you a nice, intelligent blend of mythology and character and action. And it's anchored by a really good performance by Michael Fassbender as Magneto. And I actually hope to see some more sequels to this film in this timeline. So hopefully that'll come to be. Anyway, if you're a comic book fan, action fan, and if you haven't seen this, well, what are you waiting for? You need to check it out. Okay, moving right along. Number 18 is Rise of the Planet of the Apes. Yes, I know this was a pretty curious project when I first heard about it. It's not something I really thought was going to work. And those trailers, oh, what can I say? Those things were just awful. Anyway, the movie proved to be thoughtful, touching, and intelligent, and just a lot of fun. It has a really good, it builds logically, it has characters you care about, and Andy Serkis turns in another great motion capture performance as Caesar. This really is a movie that really surprised me, because based on the trailers, I really wasn't expecting much out of this thing, and it proved to be really really good. Next up, number 17 is a movie that seems to have split a lot of critics. Some people love it, some people hate it. Is Drive. It's part noir, part spaghetti western. It's a movie that has surprising amounts of violence, kind of like a Lucio Fulci horror film, where there's lots of slow periods punctuated by a some brutal acts of violence. Um, Ryan Gosling stars in it, gives a great performance as charismatic lead. It's an interesting movie. It's a movie that it feels unstuck in time. It has lots of 80s elements as well as present day elements. It's not necessarily going to be a classic, but it's really something that deserves attention. Whether or not it's supposed to be commenting anything, I don't know. I don't always watch movies for what they're trying to speak on, but this movie just it's pretty solid. It's different. It's an art house action film, if you will. So if you haven't seen it, give it a shot. Can't guarantee you're going to like it, but I certainly did. Number 16 is The Adjustment Bureau. It's a pretty good film. It's a movie that has some really big ideas and deals with them in an interesting fashion, allow you to gives you time to digest them. It deals with free will and spirituality and fate, and it's all held together by a pretty solid chemistry between Matt Damon and Emily Blunt. Excuse me. Um, it's really, I don't know what to say. It's kind of Twilight Zone-ish. It's really one that the movie seems to have been quietly forgotten. It seems like it came and it went pretty quick, and I don't really haven't really seen many people talking about it. But it's definitely worth checking out. It's definitely worth thinking about, and I suggest you all go out there and dig it up, give it a shot. Okay, moving on along to number 15 is Beginners. It stars Ewan McGregor and Christopher Plummer and Melanie Laurent, who was last seen in *Inglourious Bastards*. This movie it's sweet, it's heartbreaking, this movie is sadness with a side of hope. It's an interesting character piece that draws you in and really holds your attention, and it's another thing I really liked about it is that it's told in an unconventional fashion. And rather than being a straight narrative, it's more like memory being accessed. You know, you don't really necessarily remember things in a straight line. You remember them in chunks and pieces, and some of the facts may not be quite right. You know, there might be something a little wrong, but it's just the way memory works. It's not a chronological thing, and that's the fashion this movie is told in, and it's really pretty interesting. It's a fascinating character piece. It's the kind of film that will sit with you for a while. Some really strong relationships, and it's really definitely worth checking out. Number 14 is Young Adult. This is a pretty interesting look into a character who's in a perpetual state of arrested development. Charlie Theron plays this divorced writer of young adult fiction who decides to, who's living in Minneapolis. I believe it was Minneapolis. He decides to move to go back to the small town where she came from, to try to rekindle romance with her now happily married high school boyfriend, played by Patrick Wilson. It's it's really fascinating to watch her as she goes about these self-destructive ways, that these things that's it's not, it's not really going to work out well for her. And it's also helped along by some good insight from a former classmate played by Patton Oswalt. Um, it's an interesting film because this character doesn't really learn anything. There's a moment towards the end where it looks like she's going to like turn the page and have that Hollywood ending, learn how to make herself a better person. But just like it's over in the blink of an eye, and she's back to where she was. It's pretty interesting in that fashion. It was written by Diablo Cody, who was best known for Juno and Jennifer's Body. This might be her most mature work. It's the one with the least amount of crazy language. The way that she had written her first two films. A lot less lingo, I guess you could say. It still feels very distinctly like a Diablo Cody film. It's helped out. It's helped out by solid direction from Jason Reitman, who also made Up in the Air and Thank You for Smoking. It's a pretty good combination. I would actually like to see them work again, and I'm actually looking forward to seeing this movie again because I think there's more. There might even be even more to it than I think there is. Okay, number 13 is an animated film, and possibly the best animated movie of the year, in my estimation, anyway. It certainly beats out Cars 2, and that's Rango. It's a movie that plays out like a live action, and while that's not nothing particularly new, this one still feels fresh and unique due to the solid writing, its acting, and some fantastic design. It's kind of like an animated Tarantino film, how it takes in all manner of different inspirations and kind of molds them into something new. It's really it's fantastic. I don't know, I can't really say enough about this movie. It was directed by Gore Verbinski. I believe this was his first animated project, and he brings a unique vision to it. It's kind of reminiscent of Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas, which also starred Johnny Depp. Who Johnny Depp is the voice of Rango in this film. It was actually a lizard. It's it's a movie that plays really well for kids as well as adults. There's enough there for both without really catering to either side. Um, Either way, it's definitely a movie you should check out if you haven't seen it already. Number 12 is The Muppets. This is a movie that had me smiling from start to finish. I don't know how you couldn't watch this movie and not smile. It's funny, it's touching, it's clever. It's a movie that knows exactly what it's trying to be and what it wants to be and what it is. It's very insidery, self-referential, but it's got some fun songs in it. It's got some fun performances. Jason Segel does a really good job writing it as well as performing in it. It's just great seeing these Muppets back on the big screen again. It's been so long. Now the Muppets never really left the public consciousness, but there is definitely a time when they weren't as popular as they used to be. But this is definitely one that it certainly plays on nostalgia for a bit for fans, but it serves as a great introduction for a new generation. And this is I can't not like this movie. Okay, and finally, number 11 on this list is Midnight in Paris. It's the latest Woody Allen movie. It's really something special. It's romantic. It's magical. It's subtly funny. It's a movie that I probably would probably get more out if I knew more about literature. But even still, there's no denying how great this movie is, how much nostalgia it kind of plays on, and how sweet and good natured it is. Owen Wilson gives a really solid performance, as well as Marion Cotillard, who's really really enigmatic. She's a fantastic role here. It's another one that uses nostalgia to its benefit, and it's just a movie that really should be seen. It's a nice, quiet, subtle film, and well, that battle wraps it up for the back 10 of the top 10. And I hope you check me out over at criticaloutcast.com to read more about these films. Most of them I have full reviews of, and stay tuned. So hopefully I'll have my top 10 up soon. Thanks for watching.